Hi, Faust.
Hello, everyone. Hi, E. Just giving a couple of minutes for everyone to join while I work out the screen sharing.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Feynman. Let's check if my camera's working. Yes,
It's working.
thanks. Okay, let me work out where my screens are. Mm. Hello? Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, let's get started. We did recently go through our PR list during the PR review meeting, but just a quick status check. Jun Cheng is not on the call, but I think he was able to merge the auth provider unit test PR, and he's probably still working on the reviewing the comments from Akash on 1150 update verifier reference. 1173, Akash is this the old? Oh, okay, sorry, this is the new one. So newly opened yesterday. That's add vulnerability report verifier. So I guess that one is in progress, Akash.
Yes, yeah. So this is going to be the one that should be reviewed and then eventually merged. I've finished adding the unit tests, and I'm right now in the process of adding the end-to-end tests, and then it should be ready for review.
Yeah, just wondering, like, would you be interested in doing a demo of the current experience?
Sure, yeah. I can queue it up for next week if that's possible. I don't have a demo ready yet.
Yeah, that'll be great. I'll try to have a prototype for the SBOM verifier as well. And then I plan to like do whatever updates based on feedback.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah, just a chance for people to provide feedback before the PR actually merges.
Susan, just an editorial note. Next Wednesday, some folks in the US might. It is not.
Thanksgiving.
It is a Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so there might be lower attendance from the US.
Yeah, will you be around, Louis?
I will be around. But I don't know if Akash will be.
I think I should be around. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good then. Probably it's okay.
Thanks for the note, Louis.
Yep.
1175 add multi-tenancy support discussion. Thank you for capturing all the pros and cons and the various options, Binbin. So I've added to the agenda. Would you like to, I can make you the host and you can go through the document with us.
Do you have any other topics need to discuss? Maybe we can get it later.
Yeah, sure. So I've added the multi-tenancy discussion since you've mentioned in the Ratify channel. And then the other PR that we have on the website, you also mentioned that the signing authority, like we don't differentiate between trustor and signing like authorities like CAs and TSAs. So I want to explore that one to understand the impact a bit more.
Yes, so we use it to just have, we use it to have an assumption that all the certs are from like CA type. So we didn't differentiate between those like trustor types. But now I think we already have an actual user set using the signing authority type. So basically, if a user, for example, if I have like two trustors, one is CA type, one is signing authority type, and both of them have a store named like certs. And so in this case, then there would be a conflict between the certs from CA and certs from the signing authority. So we need to support this like difference.
So at the moment, since he's only defined one type in the Ratify sample, there isn't an issue, right?
Yes, but in the future, if they have multiple types with the same store name, and then it will be a problem.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, thanks for adding that detail. And you'll be creating an issue.
Yeah, I already created one, and yes.
Cool. Okay, we can triage it later and assign a milestone as well. Yeah, so that's only the two items on our agenda. Before we go deep into the multi-tenancy discussion, are there anything else that people want to mention? Okay, Binbin. Would you like to share screen?
Yeah. Thank you.
Let me make you the host. You should be able to share now. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Share. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay, cool. So, okay, so let's start on this design talk. So basically, it's not a final decision. So I listed two options, and each one has its own like advantage or disadvantage. So I hope after the discussion we can make a conclusion that which option would be best for our use case. And for this talk, I will not go through every section, and I just will pick up some like key points that need to be discussed. So firstly, for the multi-tenancy category, I checked some like online docs. So basically, there are two categories. One is multiple teams, and one is multiple customers. And I feel in our case, it's more like a multiple teams model instead of a multiple customers. So for multiple customers, usually like each one has, so each customer usually have a single cluster. And in our case, actually, so an Azure tenant will have like a cluster or multiple cluster. And in each cluster, there will be multiple teams. So, and I think with it before, so I think we will support the multiple teams scenario in Ratify. So basically it's scoped to one single cluster, and then we would use the namespace to segregation the data and traffic between those teams. Okay. So yeah, so the basic scenario is that we want to segregate data between teams or between namespaces, and there are some terms we need to define. One is the cluster admin. So a cluster admin is the admin for the entire cluster, and they have all the access to all the resources, and they can create namespace and assign role permissions to the teams. And there is another role is team admin, so which is the admin for each team, and there is another engineers dev team, developer engineers, and they will have maybe some permission deployment to the deploy workloads to the cluster within their assigned namespace. So for the team admin, usually they are assigned by the cluster admin, and they can manipulate data in their own namespaces, but they cannot, in theory, they cannot access data from other namespaces. And so we also need at least some scenarios we want to consider. One is that the cluster admin can manipulate the namespace and the roles, and also different teams should not have access to other teams. And also the cluster admin can manage access for different teams, and users should not. It should be convenient for users to deploy and manage the Ratify service in the multi-tenancy scenario. And also we need to consider the isolation level and the resource quota. I will discuss later in more detail section. And also in a single cluster, we need to consider use case that there might be lots of teams that are working on it. For example, if there are 100 teams, so that means we might have 100 namespaces. And then, so far, is there any questions? Oh.
Shiwei had a question about the multi-teams and multi-customer.
Oh, let's go back.
Do you see the chat?
Yes, I
so
see that.
Okay.
Yeah, so for the multi-teams, it means those teams are from the same organization. For example, for example, if we are from a team, the same team, then different. We are from the same company. Then different team can have their own namespace, and they can access all the data on their namespace, and they cannot share the data between those teams. And for the multiple customers, usually means those customers are from different organizations, and they can share the data. They can share the computing resources or not. But usually, I think it's usually scoped to single cluster for single customer. But yeah, in some cases, users can also share the same cluster, but it requires more a strict isolation tech, because in the same organization there is assumption that we can trust each team, but different teams can trust each other. But for the different customers, they cannot trust each other.
Thank you for explanation. Actually, I have some questions about the trust, because usually company will employ something like called zero trust policy. So even
Yes.
it's in same org, teams are not trust each other.
Yes, that's also the case that we also need to consider. So that's why we need to discuss the data acceleration in the multi-team scenario. So even in the multi-team scenario, we still need to do some acceleration to avoid, like, for example, if one team was like attacked and then we need to ensure that this user cannot like access the data from other teams. Yeah, so firstly, I will go through some design considerations when we propose the two options. One is the access control. So currently, Ratify doesn't have any like functionality for the for Luis. Do you have any questions?
Oh yeah. Really quick, Bin, and in the case of the multi-team where you're sort of dividing workloads are using namespaces, how does like for instance like caching work? Does each namespace has its own cache? They also share cache?
Yeah, so that's one topic I will go through in the cache
I see.
section. So yeah.
Sorry, I should have read further. Anyway, yeah, okay, then continue. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for calling it out. Okay. Yeah, for the access control, currently Ratify doesn't have any functionalities on that. So, and I think that's not the responsibility for the Ratify to do the access control. So we will offload this to the cluster admin. So for example, we currently have some like open source project like Kioski and Capsule. So they have the multi-tenancy support, and they also provide the access control to different namespaces and different teams. So therefore, we can use those projects, or the cluster admins can use those projects to like manipulate the access, the role-based access control for each team, and in each like cloud provider like Azure, AWS, and GCP, they all have their own like roles and access control to do the similar thing, and so they can support the granularity to the namespace level, so which will support our case. And in this
Just
case,
a clarification, Binbin.
Yeah.
What is the scenario for access control? Is it that if I was the team admin for team A, I should not create CRDs to be used for team B? Is that the scenario where we would need access control?
Yes, that's one scenario. And another scenario that, for example, team A engineer they just by mistake deploy deploy a pod to team B namespace, and actually this should be denied by like those access control like plugin. So because the Ratify will not know, Ratify will not know this request is from team A or team B. Ratify only knows that this request is trying to deploy like image A to namespace B, but Ratify doesn't know if this is valid or not.
Got it. So even if they're not using Ratify, like let's say if they're just sharing the cluster between different teams, they should have some sort of access control already, right?
Yes.
Because different teams are deploying to different namespaces.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And also if they want to like change the configuration in different namespace, that should also be denied.
Bin, I think it would be good if your doc included some of those like scenarios, just to kind of call out this specific access control from each of the like users you called out above? Like, what does your, the team admin will do? What does the team dev have access to in this particular situation?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, that's good. I'll add it later. Yeah, and next we will talk about the data isolation. So for the isolation level, we have two levels. One is hard multi-tenancy and one is soft multi-tenancy. And for the hard multi-tenancy, so it means like tenants have no trust in each other. So which is just mentioned by Shui before. And so in this case, so different teams should not have any access to the namespace from other teams. And also the configuration and operations should also be like denied from the other teams. And for soft multi-tenancy, then that means for some data, they can be like shared or trusted by other tenants. And so, but actually it will depend on the actual use case, because for some use cases, they can share everything, but in some cases, they can not share anything. So for the data isolation, firstly, is about on the control plane isolation. So the control plane isolation is actually like we actually use the role-based access and the namespace as we just mentioned in the access control. So the control plane isolation would be like straightforward to set up. And for the Ratify, we need to like think about how we want to do the data plane isolation. And for firstly, we have the custom resource. And actually, currently we have 4 CRDs defined. And I remember 3 of them already, they are namespaced, but one of them is clustered. So I think we need to make all of them like namespaced. So in this case, every team in their own namespace can only access their like CRs in their corresponding like namespace. And yeah, this is straightforward, I think, for the CRD stuff. But for the cache, yeah, it will be a bit complicated. So currently we have both in-memory cache and distributed cache. For the in-memory cache, basically, in theory, users cannot, even for the cluster admin, they cannot access the in-memory cache directly. So I feel it will be fine to like just keep the in-memory cache for now. But also, if there is any concern on in-memory cache, we need to do some partition. For example, we add a partition key to the in-memory cache so that we can like segregate data. But I think there is no like data access from any like users, so maybe it's fine to just keep it there. But I think our focus is on the distributed cache, so which is like Redis in our example. So for the Redis, currently we will like deploy Ratify and Dapper and Redis into the cluster. So the Redis and the Ratify will be deployed to the same namespace right now. And in the future, we want, I have 2 questions. So firstly, if a team admin gets the access from the cluster admin, and so that means he can access the data in some like namespace, or maybe it's not some, let me check. So if he can like access the let me rephrase that. So firstly, if we have just one Ratify deployed in a cluster, so in that case, all teams will share the same Ratify deployment. So in this case, we need to consider if a team admin with the with the access granted from the cluster admin, can access the data from other teams. I don't know if I'm reading it correctly. So basically, if I'm the team A lead, and currently I can access the data from like team A namespace, but then I found something wrong on the Ratify pod, so I want to do some debugging, and I asked I need to like get the access to the Ratify pod. So the cluster admin grant the access to me, and now I have the full control to the Ratify, to the all the resources under this like names under the like gatekeeper system namespaces. Then in this case, I will have access to both the Redis and the Ratify, and then I can like go straight forward to the Ratify, the Redis pod and check the cache. But because all the data is cached in the same like Redis cache, like Redis pod, so I can get all the data from other teams. So I don't know if that's a case I need to consider. Luis, I see you have raised that.
Yes, Binbin. One thing that might be useful to and maybe we can sort of, I don't know if it's possible to sort of frame the high level scenario we want to accomplish with multi-tenancy. So my kind of what I would think here is eventually what we want to accomplish is for every namespace to be able to sort of have their own policy catalog or policy list, or so it might be good to sort of call those out somewhere maybe at the top of the document with Ian Feynman's help, and then sort of contextualize a lot of what is the work that we need to do sort of in the cache, right? Like how do we need to what changes we need to do in the cache to sort of support these high level scenarios. So having those high level scenarios might kind of drive the direction where we want to go with some of these decisions. Does that make sense, Binbin?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because eventually, like, what is the high level scenario you want to accomplish? Like, you have a cluster, you have different teams, namespaces. Each team, I suppose, will have different policies, so different images they want to verify, and so the scenario there is allowing the capability of the cluster each team to have its own set of policies. Like, what do we need to do in all of these? Like, how do we need to set up access control? How do we need to restructure our cache, etc. So, might be good to kind of have that as a framing, sort of like as a framing high level direction.
Okay, I see. Yeah, thank you. Hey, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think from a high level scenario, I have a document, but currently it is not in a open source version, and I think basically as Luis said, from the scenario point of view, a company has multiple teams, and each team has their own workload running in namespace, and different teams, they want to configure the policy to do some admission control without impact each other. So actually this is from high level, and just now Binbin brought up this cache scenario, cache issues. I think from the current high level scenarios I wrote in the document, the one part is about, for example, the troubleshooting scenarios. So if the policy evaluation failed, right, there will be some non-compliant status, then each team, they need to check the audit logs. So the audit logs should be separate from each team as well.
Yeah, yes, I made that.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and and I think maybe next week I will put those scenarios from to open source version so that we can review together. But currently, I think those documents, I think Bing, you already read that. But the missing part is about this audit logs.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me add some notes. Okay, so yeah, let's go back to the cache scenario. So actually here we come out two options. One is that we deploy a single Ratify in each namespace. And another way is that we just deploy a single Ratify for all teams. So it spans all the namespaces, or maybe it's just in some default namespace. For example, like gatekeeper system in the current way. So these are two like options to like implement the multi-tenancy feature. And we will discuss more about the comparison of two options later. But for the cache stuff, so if, for example, if we deploy a single Ratify for each namespace, then in this case, because the Ratify pod and the Ratify pod they are segregated by namespaces, so it will be easy to support the cache isolation. However, if we deploy just a single Ratify service, then in this case, all the cache will be like saved into the same Redis cluster. And in this case, though, the data will be like mixtured. And if a user, for example, if a like team A admin gets a full access to the Ratify server, then he will also get the access to the Redis cluster and access the data from other teams. So I just don't know if we should like deny this. We should allow this use case.
I think Akash has his hand up.
Hey, I guess.
Yeah, just to add to that, Bin, one thing maybe you want to consider is currently our Redis cache is actually encrypted using a encryption key that's stored in a secret. And so we
Yes.
could even potentially use different encryption keys per namespace and do data isolation that way too. I know, yeah, that might be possible. I'm not sure. We need to explore that, but that might be one solution to this too.
Yeah, that would be one. Yeah, I'll take a look into this. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, sounds good.
Sorry,
Yeah.
what does Gatekeeper do? Do they support multi-tenancy or not?
I think they support it in a similar like a multi namespace way, and also they just deploy the one server instead of like they just deploy the one gatekeeper in a single cluster instead of like each namespace.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion, Akash, of like basically creating the isolation level at that by encrypting by using a different encryption key. So that actually looks like a good option to consider.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you. Yeah, and also for the log stuff, because when we are doing some like a debugging process, we also need for the team admins, they need to get the logs from the Ratify pod. The currently Ratify pod is just saving all the logs into the same place. But so it's back to the two options. If we deploy a Ratify service per namespace, then this is not a problem. But if we deploy just one Ratify service, and then all the data, all the logs are saved into one like place of the Ratify pod. So in this case, like different teams can access the logs from different namespaces. So as cache we can use some like secret key, but for the logs currently we don't have a secret key. Maybe we need to do some like partition on the logs, so like different teams will save their data into different like oh no. So even in that way, so the log aggregation would be more complicated because we need to set up the log aggregation for each team.
If we could just add, like if, say for example, if this verifier is specific to a namespace and its output message could have the label, oh, this is the output for this verifier from this namespace, then I think the scenario could be if the company is piping their log to some other tool, and if they could see in the property that that there's a property called, say, namespace, to identify this log is associated with specific namespace, then the cluster admin could also, like for example, if the team admin from team A is looking for their logs, the clustered admin could also just show them the log for their namespace.
Yeah, I was thinking about this option, but that means we offload all the like the log aggregation to the users.
Yeah.
We just add a label, like for example, a namespace label to the log, but all the filtering stuff will will depend on the customers.
Yeah. But at least the least we can do is identify which log is associated with which namespace. Like all the server logs may be common, but there will be some log that can be labeled with the namespace property.
Yeah, but actually for the current Ratify, so the way we like check the logs is just using like kubectl logs and the container name or the pod name. But in this case, it will always output all the logs from this pod. So even we add the label, in this case, it will print out all the logs from like all the teams.
Yeah,
I think
this is a requirement, but I think we can approach this iteratively. Like at least there's a manual workaround.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good, thank you. And
Bingbing,
also,
Bingbing, I have one question. In this case, so for each team, in this case, actually, cluster admin can control the access, right? And that means they cannot just use kubectl logs to view the logs from the Ratify pod, right? The command will fail, right?
So basically, if they just use a very primitive Ratify without any like log pipeline, then they have to use the kubectl log to get the Ratify log. But if they have some like log pipeline set up, then they can like check the log from other like solutions. For example, if they set up the ELK and they can check the log, they can only check the log from the Kibana, but not the kubectl logs.
I mean, for the kubectl, the access should be denied, right? Because Ratify is on class level, they are on the names level. I think there should be a default access control, right? They cannot access, otherwise it will be a security issue.
Yes, but for example, if my team want to do some debugging on the Ratify, and I asked for the permission on the Ratify pod from the cluster admin, then in this case, after that, I will have the full access to the Ratify pod. So in this case, I can check the logs from the Ratify pod now.
But by default, it should be denied.
Yeah,
right?
by default, it should be disabled.
Okay. Yeah, and this is I think kubectl, this is out of Ratify control. It needs the admin to grant the access.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and yeah, please continue. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And one more stuff is about the file system or the PVC, but currently we don't support PVC, so we can focus on the file system right now. So for the file system, currently we have some data like TR certs and also some other stuff like the cosine certs and like plugin directories, and also we have local ORS cache. So those are the file system we currently have. And for some data like the TSS, it can be shared by all namespaces because each team doesn't care about the TSS between gatekeeper and Ratify. But for other team-specific data like the cosine certs and the party directories, then they should be like segregated by the namespace. So yeah, back to the two options. If we deploy just one one Ratify per one namespace, then the role permissions will help us do the source data isolation. But if we deploy just one Ratify service, then the Ratify need to handle the data isolation of this like subsystem data, like for example, the call sensors plugin directories. So, and especially for the local ORS cache. So we need to like do some partitioning on those data in one pod. And I guess this is very similar to the log and cache. And also for the PVC, so I think because currently we don't support it yet, I just raised it up, but we will not discuss it further. And yes, that's all. Yes, these points are for the data isolation. And I wonder if you have any questions for now. Okay, next we go to the resource quota. So it's not critical as the data isolation, but we also need to think about it because for like multiple namespaces or multiple teams, then for the current Ratify, we have some like CPU and memory configuration for the overall Ratify service. But in the future, if we support like multiple teams, then the resource quota will be hard to set up. So yeah, actually, we need to go back to the two options again. So if we deploy one Ratify per namespace, then it will be easy to set up just like the current way, like we set up the CPU and memory for each deployment of each namespace. But if we just have one deployment across all namespaces, then it's pretty like tricky to set up the resource quota for each namespace because that responsibility will be offered to the Ratify, and the Ratify need to set up the like CPU and memory limit. But I feel it's not the right way to let Ratify do that job. I don't know if you have any like suggestions on that.
Is there any way of or concept of as namespace based throttling?
Yeah, the throttling. Yeah, we can do the throttling, but we cannot control the like CPU or the memory usage.
I see, but then doesn't that become an issue even without multi-tenancy? So if like your single Ratify pod could always run into that, right?
Yes. Yes, we can set up a throttling, like for example, the request count for the request limit for each namespace, and but we cannot control like how much like computing and the storage used for each namespace.
I see.
Yeah, maybe we can use that, but it's not so easy to set up.
Yeah, just like Louise was mentioning the throttling. If we throttled, like if we said every namespace can only have 5 verification per second, then wouldn't that mean the less requests, would that mean less use of CPU, less use of memory?
I feel it
That just
depends
be
on. I feel it depends on the image like struct, the artifact chain, because for some images they might have just one signature, and for some images they might have like like maybe 50 notation signatures. Then the result will be quite different.
Yeah, we can review what is the right metric to throttle, like a run of a verification. But I think it is a concern resource quota, but I think it's good to label the priority as well. Like maybe in V1, we won't support throttling, but maybe data isolation is more of a more important requirement.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you. So here we come out the 2 proposed solutions. So one is that just like I mentioned before, one is about like a deployment per namespace and another is per cluster. So basically, if here is an overview of like deployment per namespace. So for example, we have team A, team B, and for each team we have deployed the Ratify, Redis workloads in each namespace, and we also have a gatekeeper system with a gatekeeper service, and also we have like diaper system with a diaper service. And for a single Ratify, so in team A, team B, they just have their own workload. And for the Ratify gatekeeper, they are all deployed to the gatekeeper system. Or maybe we can deploy Ratify and write to another system, another namespace, which is fine. And for diaper, it's still on the diaper system for now. So the only difference is that how we deploy the Ratify and its dependency services. In this case, the Redis and the diaper. Next, I will go through a brief comparison of the 2 options. So for the following topics, they are just more detailed comparison. But in this meeting, I can just go through the brief comparison to save time. So firstly, for the core workflow refactoring, the deployment per namespace will be easy to implement. Actually, it requires a very minimal like code change to the like workflow, but for deployment per cluster, it would require a lot of refactoring our current workflow. We need to like do some like mapping from namespace to each resource, like verify search store and policy. And for the workflow, it also need to like handle a lot of like namespace mapping. And for Helm templates refactoring for the deployment per namespace, we need to do a lot of code change. But for the per cluster, I think it requires very minimal change to the Helm chart, because the deployment is quite similar to the current way, but users just need to make some like configuration change. And then for the external data request struct, so for the deployment per namespace, there is no change, because for each namespace, the request will just have the image attached. But for deployment per cluster, we need to add the namespace field to the data request struct, because the Ratify doesn't know which namespace it will be deployed. So it requires the user, it will require gatekeeper to send out both the image and the namespace to Ratify. And for the external data request number, so I checked into the gatekeeper code base, and I found it will send out, it will iterate through all the external data providers to send out one request per provider. So in this case, if we deploy Ratify per namespace, it will require one request per Ratify deployment. So if we have like 100 Ratify deployment, we will send out 100 requests for just one admission review request. And for deployment per cluster, it will just have one request, like the current implementation. I remember, I guess you had a comment on this before. Is that right?
Yeah, so my understanding is that the external data provider resource is tied to a specific service endpoint. So if you had multiple Ratify instances, you'd have, each one would have their own service endpoint. And so you would need to, I think, register per namespace, Ratify a new external data provider. So you'd have, if you have 100 namespaces, you'd have 100 external data gatekeeper resources, which that translates to, you have to kind of probably hard code into your constraint template, which provider you want to call. So maybe if it's a reasonable assumption that if you're using multi-tenancy, you're going to have separate constraint templates per tenant. In that case, it's probably okay, because then you can just fill in the corresponding namespace provider for Ratify that corresponds to that. But if you're going to be sharing constraint templates between your different tenants, then it kind of becomes, it might be more challenging that way too. That's at least my interpretation.
Yeah, thank you for the update. Yeah, so I feel that's one concern on deploying per namespace, because it's pretty hard to set up between the gatekeeper and the Ratify, because currently gatekeeper is deployed just one service for the entire cluster. So that's why I feel it's not very compatible between this option with the gatekeeper's multiple tenancies support.
Yes.
And for the resource, yes. So I will take another look into the gatekeeper, and maybe I can reach out to gatekeeper to see how they set up the multiple tenancy. I just checked their code, but I didn't see the template yet.
Yes, yeah, that sounds good. One more thing maybe to look into is how mutation will also work here. Currently, we deploy 9 different assign custom resources for mutation. And so if we do, one tenant wants mutation, another tenant doesn't want mutation, you're talking about 9 times the number of tenants you have. So if you have 100 tenants, you have 900 resources for mutation, potentially.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's keep. Okay, so for the resource quota, as we mentioned, so for the per namespace option, it will be easy. We can just use the role-based access and some other permission setup. So, hey, sorry, Luis, you have.
Yeah, I think so. I like this column. I think that your assessments here are sort of based on sort of like the development cost. I would kind of also like to have maybe something similar in terms of user experience, right? Because it might be easier to sort of implement or to refactor the Ratify instance per namespace, but does the customer really wanna maintain, or like is there like a customer support where for maintaining all the different Ratify instances? Is like I guess kind of what I would like to make sure is that we don't make some of these decisions based just on our cost, but also kind of what would be the easier or the simpler experience for customers.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll add that. Okay, yeah, we have 3 minutes left. So yeah, for the resource quota, log isolation, and cache isolation, as we just discussed, for if we deploy like per namespace, so that will be pretty straightforward and easy, and there or minimal code change to Ratify. But if we deploy just one Ratify, then source data isolation would require a lot of code changes on the Ratify workflow. And for the resource efficiency, so firstly, since we need to deploy one service each namespace, so that means we will have a lot of like Ratify services deployed. And just as I just mentioned, even for the gatekeeper, we also need to deploy a lot of like corresponding CRs, like the mutations, for like the assign resources, and also for the providers, and for the deployment per cluster. So the resource efficiency would be very high, and there would be less like waste on the computing and the storage resources. And for the deployment for new namespace, it's actually the customer user experience. So, and also I think with Xinghe before, so if we deploy like per namespace, then if we create a new namespace in this cluster, then the cluster admin have to like create a new deployment for each namespace. But for the other option, so it only requires a very initial Ratify deployment. And in the future, if we add a new namespace, so there is no like manual operation from the customer. Everything will be handled by the Ratify. So this is a huge difference between the user experience. And for the MTLS setup, currently we just deploy to the gatekeeper system. So the third rotator from gatekeeper will handle the third rotation and the third sequence. But if we want to deploy per namespace, then we have to maintain our own CSS, and we should do the third rotation like manually, like for example, like every like 1 year or 10 years. This is not like fully automation. Yeah, so the following are the detailed comparison of those fields. I think I can just skip it. So basically this doc, yes, that's almost everything on this doc. So basically I just want to do some kind of comparison of these two options and try to get one like last decision on which way we want to adopt. So I think with Xinghe before, he liked the idea of deployment per cluster, but also we can see that for the implementation, and it might be easier to do like deployment per namespace. And I feel a lot of like open source projects, they do this deployment per namespace as a solution for the multi-tenancy support. And for the deployment per cluster, there might be some because we need to do a lot of code change, and that means we might introduce a lot of bugs at the same time.
Hey, Bing.
Yeah. Hey, Simon.
I didn't find the raise up hands button, but I want to share a few feedback for your design.
Yeah.
So regarding the solutions, the first solution, namespace, I have a few concerns on this solution. Especially
So which solution you are referring to?
I'm talking about the Ratify deployment per namespace.
Okay.
Maybe you, yeah, and maybe you can scroll down a little bit.
Good.
Yeah, this part. So I'm not a big fan of deploy Ratify into each namespace because as an end user, I have concerns on that users may care about the resource usage and maintenance effort. Yeah, that being said, most of users like lightweight solution and they prefer low maintenance effort solution. So, you know, Ratify as an admission controller, if you deploy Ratify to hundreds of namespaces or a lot of namespaces, they need to maintain all of those Ratify paths and Redis, as well as Dapper and related dependencies, right? I think it's a huge responsibilities for users to consider how can they maintain and operate those resources within each namespace. This will be a little bit stressful for users to consider should they use Ratify or not, since if they choose Ratify, it will bring a lot of resource consumption to their cluster.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I think you already considered that, but I think this always being the first and the foremost thing or elements that impact users' decision when they choose a validation solution for their cluster. So I'm prefer that we can consider more on the second solution, deploy per cluster. Since you know, Ratify as a admission controller, users always consider how can they run away or how can they avoid single point failure on Ratify maintenance. If they have multiple Ratify instances, they need to spend more time and efforts to maintain and keep Ratify as stable as possible. But if they have only one instance, right, they just keep the one instance high availability and stable. I just think from the maintenance and resource consumption perspective, and especially from the end user's perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I feel for these two options. For the per namespace option, I think it's good on the data isolation support, and also it requires like minimal like code change to the Ratify code base. So that's the advantage of this option. And for the other option, the per cluster. So I think if we want to have the same level of data isolation, that requires a lot of code change. But I think it's not it's not something customers will like cares about. But
yeah, I
we
agree.
need to, yes.
They would just say, you know, I'm using your product, you should have it figured out.
Right.
I agree with Payman here. Like at the customer, you just want one deployment.
Yeah. My only concern is that because for this source data, if we deploy per namespace, then because there is no code change, or we can just use some open source project add-on, then that means that's quite a mature solution. But if we do the same way to implement our own code, usually it means there might be some like bugs. Yeah. I think it's always expected to have some bugs in our code. So but maybe in the future we can fix all the bugs and then it will be fine.
Yeah, I think this makes the direction of Ratify maintenance model. Okay. So I think we should think how can we provide best, or how can we provide the best benefits for users. You know, users are quite sensitive and cautious when they introduce any new deployments or any new resource to their cluster, especially to their namespace, since most of users may have their resource quota or resource limit for their existing namespace. If your services occupy too many memory and CPU, they will be killed or will not be set up quite easily. So I think users are quite sensitive about the CPU and memory usage and the resource consumption.
Okay. Also, one more thing, since I feel like most of people are like this way, the second option, like deployment per cluster. I wonder if we should have a vote on these two options in maybe like I can set up a discussion and have a vote in the Ratify repo, or maybe I can just go straight forward to this like option and have another design doc on this.
If you wanna be fair on the if you wanna be fair on the decision making, I think you can create a vote on the GitHub discussion and list those two options.
Cool. Yeah.
And pros and cons. It will be good for others to vote on those two options. But my option would be the second one. Back to Susan.
Yeah, so first of all, Luis is trying to rejoin. Okay, yes, they can see him.
Okay. Right back.
Yeah, so I think another perspective is we will support one deployment per cluster, and we will do our best with log isolation and data isolation, and we'll documented like the level of isolation that we have. And if the customer requires strong data isolation, then they can choose to deploy per namespace themselves, since it doesn't require much of a code change. So I think we should, like, my opinion is we can go ahead with the one deployment per cluster, because that's it is something that we can support, like refactoring our names verifiers into namespace leveled resources, and then that also aligns with the gatekeeper model. And if customer really wants multiple deployments per namespace, one deployment per namespace, they can also go that route if they need to.
Okay. If in that case, I think we also need to do some updates to our Helm templates, because I tried to deploy the current Ratify two namespaces, which failed because there is some like hard coding stuff of the namespace, and I think we have to do some like required coding. So that means we will deploy Ratify per cluster by default, but we also want to support like deployment like per namespace in the future if users want to do that.
Yeah, if the customer comes back and say, we don't like your one deployment per cluster, we require very strong, isolation, then we can work with them to, maybe they will do the Helm template updates.
But one more thing about the MPLS set, the CSS with the gatekeeper. Yeah, but that's all on the customer side. It's not on Ratify side. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the reasons I asked, like, we shouldn't take the decision based on development work, but also like that might be one variable, but more important is just the customer experience overall. Because right now it's quite complex to sort of set a single Ratify instance, configure a single Ratify instance. If we add like even more complexity here with like multiple Ratify instances, and then like, the customer or the cluster admin has to deal with like cert rotations and all, it might be very difficult to maintain long term. So I agree. Let's start with like the single deployment or per cluster, and then as based on feedback from customers, we can pivot to namespace if needed.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot for your suggestions. I think I will like do more updates on this doc, and also I will send out a vote in the Ratify repo. So basically, I want to get a final decision, and since I can get more feedback from the community.
Yeah, thank you for
Okay.
driving the discussion, Binbin.
Thank you, Binbin.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Binbin.
Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.